What's up, guys? Welcome to the Imperfect Swing Golf Podcast. We're at the South African Open today, and I'm joined by one of my good mates, Rourke van der Spuy. Rourke, nice to be out in Sun City after last week, eh?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for having me on here as well, Shannon. But yeah, what a backdrop, and yeah, what a start to hopefully our final stretch of our co-sanctions in a way. So yeah, looking forward to it.
And you mentioned, the weather's looking great. I mean, how was it playing in that weather last week? Couldn't have been very pleasant, to be honest.
Yeah, I think the Joburg Open's become so synonymous with thunderstorms that it's almost kind of expected at this stage. But yeah, it's just one of those things. Joburg in the summer months, you're going to get them here and there. Luckily, I wasn't really too affected the first 2 days. I had a nice early time on the second round, but yeah, falling one shot short, I didn't have to worry about the weekend's play at least. So yeah,
and falling one shot short, it hurts. But I mean, is there some positives to take from a week like that? Obviously, you can nitpick and kind of see where you need to improve.
Yeah, and Firethorn's such a good golf course. I mean, Ram Park in general. So if you're around there coming into that moment on Friday where the cut line's going to be, you haven't really blown the tournament at least. So yeah, knowing that I was there and thereabouts, obviously one shot shy, you make it 3 or 4 different shots and then you're almost top 20 as well. So it's just a really strong golf course where it's almost going to lead up to Sun City. It's going to seem easier from this week's challenge as well. So yeah, good stead for that at least.
And what have you been working on? You haven't been out on the course yet, but you've obviously put in some work. What parts of your game are you looking to kind of improve on this week?
Yeah, the swing's in a pretty good place, which has been nice since I've started off with my latest coach, with Sean Kutsia. So it's been almost a year with him now as well. So the swing work has been done, which leaves pretty much the short game, which has always been a struggle area of mine. I think also growing up on the coast and trying to adapt to the Joburg style, it's still taking its time. But yeah, short game has still been the big focus for these coast sanctions or for these final few events for us.
And you mentioned, changing your golf coach or swing coach. When for professionals, we often see in the news headlines that, like, for instance, Rory's now back with Michael Bannon and stuff like that. For you personally, when does it come to a time when you're thinking, I need a change or something to that effect? Is it just maybe just need a different voice in your ear? Is that kind of the main thing? Because at this level, we all understand our swings to a point where we kind of know where we should be. Is it just kind of that little voice in your ear?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's quite an in-depth question in many ways, which is great though, because for me, I kind of feel like I have a good understanding of my swing. I had a good basis in college, obviously, with Mark Immelman being my coach there. That was kind of the groundwork for me for many years, even when I wasn't in touch with him as much and kind of started my journey in South Africa while he stayed over in the States. And then fiddled with coaches in between that. Always felt like I was never reliant on a coach. But eventually the results on the golf course, I think, start speaking. So I had a bit of a slump coming off the last couple of years, and I think that was just the point where I'd been trying to do it myself and bounced around a bit, and I just kind of pulled the trigger to say, okay, well, there's obviously something is not clicking. And yeah, I could feel it in my swing. I'm a natural fade player, and for a good year and a bit, I struggled with the right to left shape, and it was just couldn't get myself out of that hole. And I think the further I started digging by myself, eventually I was like, okay, I need a fresh start and try something new again.
And you mentioned a slump. We've been good mates for I think it's been like 4 years now.
Yeah.
It feels like it's been longer than that, but I've always felt like your swing is pretty good. I mean, we've played a few rounds together and I've seen it in action. Is how much of it is it mental, and how much is it, like you said, you felt it in your swing that you needed a change, but how much of it do you think is actually just kind of mentally feeling comfortable?
Yeah, the mental side is massive. I think for me, linking or harping on that mental aspect, it became a point where I almost needed to just step back a little bit and reassess, because like you say, the swing has always felt good, and I've always had faith in my ball striking per se, and I always used to lose shots around the greens in essence. So even when I was swinging it badly, I still had my chances to be making cuts or performing out there and stuff. And when you start slipping out of contention and then into the missing the cut zone, then you're like, okay, well, where actually is it? And for me, it came down to, I guess, momentum, if you want to call it that. So even though the swing was struggling, it was momentum. So having the new swing coach, I think it also put a bit more of emphasis on, just accountability, showing up, having that gees again, having that drive and stuff like that. And I think that's all part of it. When you're out there doing it yourself, you just get a bit lost. You might be putting in more hours by yourself, but you're just going around in circles almost. So it wasn't so much the searching for it. It was just maybe just packaging it all together and making it more quality over quantity, basically.
And I guess that's an interesting point, is like, because often, I mean, I worked with a coach for about 4 years, and same thing. I think it's that structure that, you know, sometimes we don't get when we're trying to find something on our own. What has kind of changed for you now, obviously being over a year with Sean? Is there a bit more structure in the way you're doing things? And like you mentioned, that accountability is kind of, you know, you've got someone to kick you in the ass if you're not doing things correctly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've been living up in Joburg for about almost 4 years now. Sean's down in Durban side, where I grew up, and my family's still there. So I've been able to manage my time kind of 50-50, and when I'm in Durban seeing Sean, it's business only pretty much. So it's not like a holiday now anymore where I go there and relax. But Durban to me now is work time, and that, like you say, it's structure and accountability. And he's also got an institute there with, you know, I think 4 or 5 other Sunshine Tour players, 2 or 3 big easy players as well. So the institute itself feels a lot like American college.
Yeah.
So you're also not just accountable with yourself and the coach, but there's other players and groups that are always happening and entertaining each other and playing and, you know, competing against each other even in the weeks off, which has been great, I think, for me as well, just to keep that intensity up during the weeks off and stuff. So it's been good.
And, you know, you've won twice on the Sunshine Tour. I mean, firstly, describe the difficulty of winning out here. I think the Sunshine Tour is very underrated in terms of the level of play out here. You know, people may look at the prize funds and think that's the level of play, whereas I think this is probably one of the most competitive golf tours in the world. And the fact that we're just playing for less money doesn't take anything away from that. So how is it, you know, do you think back to those 2 wins just to kind of rekindle those emotions that you felt over those periods?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially when you kind of in that limbo zone, like you say, of just sitting and waiting almost and wishing. But yeah, the wins are important. They are memories. They're in the memory bank as well. I think if my memory serves me correctly, it was 2015 and 2018. Which means I'm on a 3-year stint, I think. So 2021 being 3 years since the last one. Yeah, hopefully it ticks over again soon. So yeah, I mean, the timing of it happens when it happens. You almost can't really predict the wins. You just got to keep doing what you're doing and putting one foot forward. And yeah, hopefully the process itself takes care of that.
Is that kind of just the way things are? You know, like you mentioned, you can't really tell when you're going to win, but you can feel that the process is kind of fulfilling itself over and over again. As long as you put in the work, that result will then come again. Is that what kind of where you are right now?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the process is all part of it. I think leading up to my other wins as well, there was a slight trend of, you know, feeling like you were in contention once or twice, maybe in the 3 or 4 events leading up to it. And then, then the week that it all happens, it just kind of all comes together. But you got to build those good vibes. You got to almost treat every week as, you know, take the best opportunities that you can and look at all the positives. Especially like a win in Zambia as an example. It's such a interesting country where you can feel like out of sorts and, you know, away from home and in a place where things move and work differently. But if you can actually use those to your advantage, you actually gain a leap on the field, basically. Same with these coast sanctions in many ways. Like you said, the Sunshine Tour, the level is so strong that when we give up half our spots, almost the European Tour guys, you might think, oh, you know, the European Tour is in town or whatever. But in actual fact, you know, you're actually on our home courses.
Exactly.
It might even be better playing against some of the European Tour guys who might be out of their comfort zones as opposed to a full South African field of the guys that are just playing here week in and week out. And yeah, the Sunshine competition is extremely strong. So yeah, you can't fault that at all. And,
you know, coming to a place like Sun City where there's, it's fair to say there's a few distractions around here. How is it, you know, how have you kind of structured your week, you know, this week? How are you planning your week out where there'd be 9 holes, 18 holes and practicing days and time to take off? Because, you know, it's going to be about 35 degrees consistently this week. So you can't be too overworked out here. You'll definitely feel it coming down the stretch on Sunday.
Yeah, and I mean, Sun City's been such a great venue for us and such a long-time partner, Sun International, with the tour, that I think we've been averaging 3 or 4 visits here a year. over the last 2 or 3 years as well. So it does feel a bit like a home away from home in many ways. So yeah, it seems pretty easy to just slip into the routine. I've kind of figured it out over the past few visits. And like you say, especially watching the weather. Last week was a bit of a coldish one, surprisingly, but you know, this week we're back up to that 35, 40 mark, and it's going to be hot, it's going to be humid. So luckily I feel comfortable on the course. I know the course pretty well by now. We've seen it enough. So yeah, the work starts here on the Monday, but yeah, you definitely want to ease into it until you start on Thursday and save that energy. Luckily, we're not one of the players that need to come out here and scope every inch of this course like some of the first-time visitors here this week.
And you know, Gary Player Country Club, great course, quite soft out there. You know, what are some of the key holes out there that you feel, let's call it like your scoring holes? What are the holes that you have in mind? You know, like you mentioned, I think this is what, the third, fourth time this year that you guys are coming through here. So like you mentioned, you have a good understanding, but where do you think are the pivotal holes where you can possibly get some good momentum, you know, something that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Gary Player, it is such a strong course, as you mentioned. So you feel like the opportunities aren't many out there, but to be honest, that kind of works in my favor a bit. It kind of feels a bit of a coastal feel where par is your friend and you try and keep the doubles off the card in many ways. With regards to opportunities though, the par fives here are pretty crucial. I mean, if you get the ball in the fairway off the par fives, most of them are reachable depending on where the tees are. And then there's a couple par fours in between where they like to throw things around as well. I think probably the old 6th hole, which might be the 15th now.
With the love grass in
the front, and they can throw that tee forward and make it semi-drivable. But even that hole on a normal day, you know, you got a long iron off the tee and you're coming in with the wedge. So there are a couple of those holes where you're not just bashing driver off the tee every hole. So you can maybe relax for 2 or 3 holes out there in a sense. But yeah, par fives are key out here.
And lastly, I mean, your strategy going in this week, obviously driving off the tee is pivotal around here. There's not many holes where you can not take driver. If you're being quite honest, like you mentioned, it's quite a beast.
Yeah.
You know, what is there anything you've made changes in your equipment, maybe from your bag last week to this week? Maybe took out the 2-iron, added a hybrid or something to that effect?
Yeah, the bag's been consistent for the last, I'd say, 8 or 9 tournaments. But before that, I'd say the only real changes I've put the new Strixon ZX7 5-wood in the bag.
Okay.
So I've always been a 3-wood player. I just felt like, especially coming into the par 5s, especially in the Highveld and in Joburg side, I was going from 2-iron to 3-wood and kind of missing that
middle mark,
in between higher shots. So the 5-wood's been in the bag, and it's long enough where I feel I don't need the 3-wood either. So it's been a nice little utility club that I've been using quite a bit these days. So yeah, everything else is pretty stock standard. And like you say, you got to drive it well out here. So having the driver, the 5-wood and the 2-iron, even the 4-iron as kind of the options off the tees, you've got your options at least out here.
And you mentioned, you know, distance and you know, having that comfort off the tee. You know, with everything that's been going on from the Bryson DeChambeau to long drive growing in audience, have you been pressured in any way to try and pick up a few extra meters, and have you put in any work towards that, or is that something that, you know, you've been just working with Sean that comes naturally with your swing?
Yeah, I think it would be more in a phased place at the moment. But yeah, when I joined back with Sean and going back to Durban the last year or so, I rejoined with my physical trainer as well. So having my trainer available, he's also kind of there and thereabouts, which is exactly why it's not a holiday anymore. So it's back to business in Durban. So yeah, between Clinton over at Durban Country Club and Sean, they definitely keep me in check. But I wouldn't say we've been chasing distance. I think we've just been chasing better physical health in a way. And with that comes, you know, extra speed, extra strength, etc. So I do feel in a better place than a year ago, as an example. But yeah, certainly not chasing the distance for any reason yet. But I do feel healthier, if you want to say that way.
Is that something that some guys should be careful, you know, something to be careful about, like chasing something like that? You know, it's not to say that not everyone can hit it long, but it's not meant for everyone to go out on that kind of extreme version of chasing numbers like 190 ball speed, 200 ball speed. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous, though.
Yeah, and I think us being in that transitional phase now where it is going to start becoming a big factor in the years to come, that, I think I'm still slightly on the generation that's kind of wary of it, if you want to say. But yeah, I think if you had the opportunities to, and maybe a good off-season time, it would be worth maybe tinkering or at least seeing what the options are. I know with the shaft length change now, they want to restrict it. I mean, I was very curious to see how the longer shafts would have played out as well, but I've kind of haven't gone that far yet. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing how an extra half an inch or an inch on your shaft can make
completely
4
changes.
to 10 miles an hour club head speed sometimes. So I mean, once that all settles down and they find exactly where the comfort zone is, it's still going to be something that the guys are going to be chasing no matter what. I think it's key for golf in the long run. So it's not so much try and get ahead of the curve, but try and keep up as much as you can maybe. So I think Dylan Fratelli is a great example. I saw his stat on the PGA Tour, how much he's actually gained.
Yeah, I think he was saying 20 yards in year-to-year difference. I mean,
so it's doable per se. So obviously you hope that results in results on the course, but I mean it is doable. The guys are able to do it like that.
And out here, you know, Sun City, the ball. Can you maybe explain, for instance, for a Joburg golfer, what's the difference in like distance? You know, is there a percentage you add on, subtract? You know, what's the way that you and the way you look at distance now? Is it kind of 10% on, 10% less, or is it more or less the same as the high felt?
Yeah, I think you have to quote me if I'm wrong, but I think it is slightly less altitude. So in theory, the ball should go slightly shorter.
Shorter, yeah.
But with the heat and just the way it feels out here, I've always played it pretty similar to Joburg. Okay. And I feel like if anything, the heat actually makes the ball travel a bit further here. I've seen some shots at Sun City that really want to travel. So yeah, distance is definitely not something that you're missing out here, even if the altitude is slightly less. But yeah, and then for me, like you say, the 10% rule is pretty much in effect for me as well. I was lucky enough that when I went to the States, I changed to yards. Okay. So my coastal readings are all in yards. And then it translates pretty accurately to meters. In the high felt. So I change between yards on the coast, meters in the high felt, and then Sun City is luckily enough still a high felt number for me. And then you go to like a Swaziland where it's almost in between, and then you got to kind of
toss it up. And
exactly. Then the temperature normally dictates that for me. If it's going to be a hot week, then I'll stick with meters. If it's a colder week, maybe move to yards. But yeah, so far it works. I think also having our yardages from last year in our books and stuff, you're always referring back to... It
does help that you guys have come here quite often to experience different temperatures, different times of the year as well.
Exactly that.
So you kind of can dial that in quite nicely.
Yeah, and the practice rounds tomorrow and Wednesday will also dictate that. I'll see if the 8-iron, as an example, is flying the yardage that it was last time, and if it's off by slightly, then you just kind of you'll get an average pretty quickly once you get a few shots out there.
And bring up your practice rounds. What are some of the things, you know, for people who are not accustomed to seeing pros in their element during a practice round? What are some of the things you test out besides, you know, looking at the distance factor? Are you kind of hitting to different sides of the greens, or are you breaking up, you know, your greens into quarters and kind of seeing where's the attackable pin locations and so on?
Yeah, I think Sun City is a great example of that as well. You talk about making the greens into quarters. There's a lot of clover-shaped greens out here at Sun City. So front, middle, left, middle, right, back, and I mean you'll find that the greens are quite big, but they actually feel like pretty small targets out there. And obviously knowing the common pins from the last few years out here, you kind of do get a feel of where they're going to be almost on each day as well. You can kind of get pretty close with your guesses if you do enough studying. So yeah, the practice rounds are certainly about knowing which greens the tougher flags are, and then working your kind of safe play, your aggressive flags. You kind of can pick and choose between the two. So like you say, one hole which you'll have a pitching wedge in both days, it's going to be a green flag the one day and it's going to be a red flag where you're playing safe the next day. So your birdie holes can chop and change out here depending on the flag locations, big time.
And lastly, you know, you have one of the veteran bagmans or caddies out here. Jacob's been around the block. He's won on the biggest stage at Alfred Daniel as well with Pablo. Yeah. How nice is it to have that second voice? You know, I think people at home don't always get the full picture of what role a caddy plays and how pivotal that role is. Can you maybe give us a bit of a little explanation into, you know, how pivotal that relationship, player-caddy relationship really is?
Yeah, and Jacob, like you say, Jacob's been great for me. We've done about 9 or 10 tournaments this season.
Feels a bit longer than that.
It does feel longer. He used to caddy for a good friend of mine, Tyrants, so we used to do a lot of, you know, practice rounds together. So I do feel like I've known Jacob for years. And like you say, his resume is pretty outstanding for a guy that's been out here for many years. He's caddied for a few European Tour players. He's done stints in Europe on European and Challenge Tour. He's obviously won at Leopard Creek before. So I mean, he's had a good run. So I certainly take his advice out there with a lot of insight, and really like listen to what he's actually saying, because he does know what he's doing. And Sun City, if I'm not mistaken, is one of his home courses. I think he started his caddy career out here. He was caddy master out here for a long time. His family's up in Rustenburg as well. So, I mean, a place like this, he feels very much at home, and it certainly, relays into the play on the course. He's very comfortable out here, which is great.
And how much does that also give you that comfort, knowing that, for instance, at this venue that you mentioned, he's been around here for years and years? Does that also give you that added comfort when he says, Rourke, it's breaking this way? Does that just give you that extra bit of comfort on those kind of calls?
Absolutely. I mean, like you say, I really do actually listen to him like these types of weeks, and especially on a course that he knows so well. Yeah. So if he has anything to say, it's certainly going to go in one ear, sit in the head for a while, and I'm going to think about it. So yeah, I mean, he's just a great guy to have out here. He knows more people than half the tour out here. So if you ever need anything as well, I'm just always like, hey, Jacob knows. Come help me out here. He's like, there's David, there's Phil, there's all these different guys that he's known for years and years. So yeah, I think from even knowing which toilets to go to which way the putts are breaking, he knows everything out here, which is great.
And Rourke, to close off on, thanks for coming on. I think this week is going to be quite a challenging one I looked at the weather. It does say there's a bit of scattered thunderstorms. I don't want to say we brought it up from Joburg, but how are you going to prepare for that? Are you kind of just going to hope that we somehow get a piece of that in the practice round, so that you at least can account for those kind of conditions?
Yeah, good question. I think at the point where I'm at now in my career, I've kind of learned to just accept things as they are. So yeah, we can look ahead and plan and prep. When it comes to playing in those conditions, like you say, luckily we got a taste of it last week as well, because you do come out of a very dry summer and then a very dry winter, and then move into a very wet summer. So it is very different conditions. But yeah, whatever the week throws at us this week, come Thursday, Friday, morning, afternoon, we just assess on the day and adapt as quickly as we can. So yeah, it's pretty much all foot down come Thursday morning though.
Perfect. With that, Rourke, thanks so much for coming on. You guys I'm sure we're going to be broadcasting all 4 days, so be sure to tune in and watch Rourke in action. Rourke, all the best this week, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time.